to another episode of Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is a very important person. Well, all women are very important, but this one is special. Her name is Carole Taylor, and when I first noticed her, she was the finance minister in the Liberal government. And you know what I liked most about her? Her red shoes. And I did ask her about that. Let's meet Carole Taylor. How are you doing?
So good to see you again, Sushma.
Lovely to see you too. So when you had interviewed me, I asked you about those red shoes. Are you fond of red color?
I am. Well, look at your chair. Look at journal.
That's right. Now, as a journalist and then politician, was this something that you felt was just normal? That it just happened from journalism to politics?
Well, I shared with you a love of journalism and trying to figure out stories and bring them forward. And I found that if it was someone that I thought had great value or great contribution, I would always say to them, why don't you run for politics? We need more good people running.
Right.
And so you can only say that a certain number of times, and then you have to look in the mirror and go, like, if you're asking other people to do it, you should do it. And so I did it as an evolution out of journalism, and I never saw it as a full-time career.
No.
In fact, I feel full-time politicians, they lose touch with people. But if you can come in and dedicate yourself to trying to do the right thing for a period of time, then go back to real life, I think that's when you give the most value. So that's what I ended up doing.
True, because you just stayed in politics till, and you didn't run back in 2009 for the second term.
And earlier, when I was in municipal politics, I did 2 terms and then went
Said goodbye to it.
Back to real life.
So your real life is journalism, really?
Yes. Yeah.
Meeting people.
Yeah.
So let me take you back to your childhood. Where were you born?
Toronto.
I should have known that because you were Miss Toronto in 1964, right?
It would have been hard to do if I'd lived in Hamilton, I guess. But
So how was life? Parents, let's talk a little bit about you as a child.
I had wonderful parents who were very, conservative, not in the political way, but very, you go to church, you work hard, you look after kids. And so it was a wonderful upbringing. And the detour into my life, either as Miss Toronto or journalism, was so accidental because there were no role models for me to look at and say, oh, I want to grow up and be on television.
Right.
But when my high school entered me in a beauty contest, and out of that, they put me in the Miss Toronto contest. I had no say in all this. I was just going like, huh? I've got to do my homework. That's what my father always said. Have you done your homework?
Right.
And so I ended up in that place. But the fun thing about the Miss Toronto was that they offered the winner a choice of prizes. You either got $5,000 or university education. And I went,
oh.
University education.
That's what I want.
Absolutely, because my family, it would have been tough to put me through university.
Right.
And so after that, they went, oh, and they took away that option.
I was wondering that, when you got into university, education has meant a lot to you. Always has.
Always has. And in high school, they always put me in the classes where I took all the maths and all the languages. And, I had to do German while I was doing lunch break, So I was heavily into all the options that were available. But, I didn't have anything that excited me. I didn't feel, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer.
Right.
And so when I went to university, I thought maybe the light would go on. It didn't go on.
With Indian parents, they sort of give you a guideline.
I know. I didn't have that.
You have to be a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. With your parents, it was like just get your education.
Education, absolutely. And I had started as a teenager doing a television show.
Yes.
And it's so bizarre when you think back. First of all, it was black and white.
Right.
And I knew nothing about it, had no interest in it, but the occasion came up and I started to do this show that became a national show. But fortunately, CTV have no archives. And so no one has recorded all my mistakes. No one sees me as that kid in front of a camera trying to figure it out. But by doing it for all those years, and I did it through university, I still thought at university something would occur to me, and it didn't, so I just kept doing television.
Now, television, you did many things in television,
things, yes.
right? I mean, and the morning show probably was you're the first person to do the Canada AM for CTV, wasn't it?
Right, and it happened at a funny time in my life. When I talk to university students or young people, I always say, the right job is never going to come along at the right time.
Right.
Like sometimes they're always waiting, well, it doesn't quite work. Well, mine, the opportunities came when they never worked.
Right.
And with Canada AM, I just had my baby in May. And they came in the summer, they said, oh, we're starting this great new show. We're going to compete with the Americans and the Today Show. And I said, no, because I'm looking after a baby. Anyway, they managed to talk me into it. They seduced me because it was live.
Yeah.
And it was all about public policy.
Right.
And you couldn't script it. It had to be like this. And so it was very exciting, other than the hours.
You talked about you were having a baby, or you had a baby. I want to come to that part, because for our listeners and our viewers, marriage and children in the eyes of the parents is most important. I want to come to that part of your life, but I want to take a very short commercial break and come back. So we'll get into that, but before we do that, I wanted to find out how many in the house, how many siblings do you have?
One sister.
Just one sister. So a household of?
Four.
And women dominating?
No.
No?
Well, we were both girls, but I wouldn't say that we dominated anything.
That's interesting. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We are talking to Carole Taylor. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Carole Taylor. Carole Taylor is the recipient of Order of Canada and Order of British Columbia. The order is Order of British Columbia and then Order of Canada. Or maybe the other way around. So let's talk about Order of British Columbia and Order of Canada. So you got Order of Canada first?
Yes.
That was when you were living in Ontario?
No, I was living here, but I've been working in national television all my life. And,
right.
It was 2002, I think, so quite a long time ago.
Wow. And then you received Order of British Columbia after that.
Yes.
Now, the orders that are given by either the provincial government or the federal government is because people do good in their particular field, or they do good for others. Do you ever feel that there are some people who receive these orders and are not worthy of it?
Well, to be honest, when you see the list, you don't know most of the people, so it would be hard to say. I do believe that there are many, many worthy people that don't get named.
Right.
And that's, I guess, because of the process. I don't know the insides of how the process works, but I gather nominations are made, and there's a group in Ottawa, for instance, that looks at your whole history and makes the decision. But there are lots of people who should receive these awards.
Mm-hmm. And it sort of builds their credibility as well.
It does, yes, and it is an honor.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when you received it, especially the Order of Canada, you get a lecture about you should wear the pins.
Yes.
Because it means something to Canada, and it relates to our British Commonwealth, and so you take it seriously.
We were talking about you doing Canada AM.
Yes.
And you were already married and had a kid.
Yes.
Your son, how old is he now?
I don't pay much attention to birthdays, but I would say he must be around late 40s.
That's very nice.
Yeah, he's a writer.
Uh-huh.
He's a writer in New York. And I can remember when he was going through school and he wanted to do his master's in journalism. And I remember saying to him, oh my God, you're choosing a hard road. Like, really? Are you sure? But he loved writing, always.
Right.
As a little kid, he was always writing. And so fortunately, he didn't pay attention to his mother. And he went through, and he was an editor here. and got headhunted out of New York. And he's been in New York now, I guess, 25 years maybe.
Wow. What made you leave Toronto and come to British Columbia?
Art Phillips.
Art Phillips.
I was sent out to interview him for W5, which
Right.
was another major show that I spent time on, and ended up moving out here.
Right. And is this when you also tried civic board?
It was a few years after I moved out here, but I did see the inside of politics. As a journalist, you always see the outside.
That's right.
And you see the prepared statements, and
Right.
you see what they want you to see.
Yeah.
But being married to somebody who was in the middle of it, you saw all the stuff that went on behind the scenes.
Right.
But I also saw what could be done. If you had an agenda and you really wanted to do something good for the community, I felt you could do it. And so I went in quite optimistic about the opportunities. You can't, if you're going in for glory, you're just going to be really in a bad place. But if you have an idea of something you'd like to work on and change, the staff want to work with you, and they help you formulate the motions or whatever you want to bring forward. So I found it a very positive experience.
Politics is a totally different beast. When you get into politics, I guess you have to be either passionate about the topic that has brought you into politics, or what is around you that you want to address. So in your case, what was it?
I think it was seeing the possibility of how you could shape a city. And I had certainly opinions about how I felt Vancouver was different and special, and
Right.
how we could play on protecting the environment and, doing things that were compassionate and good. I have to tell you, I'm not feeling so good about the city right now, but that was my reason for going in, and really worked on things. I brought in the first children's advocate for the
Right.
city, and my thought there was, as planners and engineers, they design a house or they design an area.
Right.
And they come to you as a politician, they say, oh, and it looks lovely and whatnot. No one was ever saying, will it work for families? Will it work for kids? Like, is this a place where kids would be safe, or how far do they go walk to school? And so that was the notion of the children's advocate, always at the table and always saying, I wonder, would that work? And so I really like being able to do things like that.
You said that you're very unhappy with how our city is growing.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't meant to be for more than, 3 million people. It's busting at its seams now.
Well, not only that, the disorder that we've allowed, and that's through public policy.
Right.
So I'm always interested in public policy. But the whole public policy idea of closing down Riverview and saying to all those people who had, many of them, very serious mental health problems, oh, you'll all be fine, closer to home, off you go, here's a bus ticket, not realizing that what would they do about housing? How would they get their medications? Like, who's going to be supporting them when they have problems? And so, it was all North America, not just Vancouver. We just decided that was how mentally ill should be handled. And I would say probably 95% of people with mental illness, that works.
Right.
But there are ones with serious disorders that are victims then when they're on the street. So that, combined with the public policy initiative to decriminalize drugs.
Right.
I don't know if you have had the misfortune of either, I hope not walking, but even driving through some parts of the downtown east side. It's disgraceful that something like that is happening in a wealthy, beautiful city.
Well, they're thinking of reopening Riverview.
They're thinking of secured care and change the form.
Right.
So maybe the form of Riverview was wrong. Too
Right.
big, too not sensitive to all the differences. So they've got one called Redfish that's already open, and it's only 60 beds, but it's a compassionate, it's almost like a home where people are, and it's shared activities, social activities, mental health workers, doctors, everybody there giving support.
To
And
just 60.
Yes, but I think that what I hope they're thinking about is doing more models like Redfish and doing around the province. so that if your family's in Kelowna, best to have the help nearby.
So it has been about 20 years since the WIF was closed, right?
Well, I remember talking about it even when I was a counselor
Right.
in 90.
90, wow, wow. I'm going to come back and talk to you about politics is your life. I'm going to talk about that, but let's take a short commercial break. Carole Taylor is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Carole Taylor, a journalist, a politician, and I think you are both put together because you are a journalist first and then a politician. A journalist who thinks about the issues that are around you and try to tackle. And as a politician, you try to do that. And if you could, you did it. If you couldn't, you've come back to journalism to then prod other people to do it.
I think journalism made me a better politician because a good journalist is asking all the questions. It's not just one side, everything's black and white.
Yes.
Nothing is black and white.
No.
And you get used to looking for different voices, hearing them all, and then you have to make a decision.
True.
And that's how I treated politics. Whatever the issue was, I talked to as many people as I could from different points of view, and then came to a conclusion and tried to do it.
Now, in politics, there are so many things that you wanted to correct and do. Let's talk a little bit about carbon tax. Mm-hmm. You were the first person to introduce that. What was the idea behind that, and why is carbon tax good for the government or for the people, or explain that if you can?
I'd love to talk about it because they've changed the model from what I tried to do, and I think that's an important thing to say. Premier Campbell came back he always took a summer vacation and came back with ideas. And he came back and said, I want to go to a green agenda. And this was quite early, but it was when Schwarzenegger was trying to do the same thing in California. And so he said to every cabinet minister, look in your ministry and see anything that you could do. Okay. So we were all doing different tasks. Finance, of course, everyone had sort of shied away from carbon tax, but that was a possibility. So working just with a very small, tight group within finance, we modeled and modeled and modeled. If we do it this way, who gets hurt? If we do it this way, how can we help? What about a rural family? What about a senior? And we worked and worked it until we got a model that we felt we were returning to those in need more than they would be charged. And we also returned to business money. And we found that in our modeling that business would probably bring in 2/3 of the money we brought in, and consumers 1/3. But we returned only 1/3 to business and 2/3 to consumers because we thought a lot of businesses will pass it on. So we came up with a model, but the core of it that I thought was important, it had to be revenue neutral.
Right.
Because I knew enough about how people felt in the community through journalism to know nobody trusts politicians. And so if I said, here, give me all that money, and I promise you I'll do good things with it. I'm a nice person, I'll do, no. And so what I felt was we brought in all that money, and we passed legislation that said every penny goes back to the community and to businesses, every penny. So I haven't got my little fingers on it. No future finance minister will. And I think that's what helped it get accepted in the early days. As time went on, of course, each premier, Christy Clark included, started to change that model. And they said, well, we'll keep a little bit here and we'll do it for something good.
So it got adulterated.
Yeah, and we'll keep a little bit more here and we'll do something good. And that denigrated the value or the purity of it. And then, of course, we saw our prime minister, he was losing votes in Atlantic Canada, so all of a sudden they get it, free fuel, like free of the carbon tax. And so now I think it's been degraded as an idea because people have seen, I can just hear them saying, we knew this would happen, we knew this would happen, and now government just uses it as revenue. So I think that its integrity has been undermined, and the way back I'm not sure, but this is not my carbon tax that they're doing, and I wouldn't support that model.
You know, I like the way you started the program and you said that, you know, to be in politics, you have to be there for a few years. And when there are, you know, politicians who are there for many years, they lose touch with what they need to do. I mean, it's the pension that they're looking for eventually at the end of the day.
I got no pensions. I kept leaving.
You kept leaving, didn't finish 2 terms at the same time. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? I love the program that you're doing. I love the way you get into people's minds and ask them questions and bring their stories out. What is there for you in the next 5 years?
I hope it's a continuation of what we're doing. Oh Boy Productions with Stuart McNish and my magnificent crew that you've all met and know so well. We are a real tight team.
Yes.
And so we've changed the idea, like BC Legends was a very important thing for me to do, get people's history on tape while they were with us. And then we switched from doing people to looking at issues. Now that will change in some way as we go along, but I hope it's with the same crew, and I hope that we try new ideas as we go. But this is what I've always wanted to do. I remember when I was doing W5, and a pretty big national show, and I had a woman producer who was exceptional, and she and I put together a plan for a show we'd like to do. And we went to him, Tom Gould, and we presented it. We were all excited, and I wanted to do people. I wanted to do profiles of people. They always get forgotten. You hear the action, but you don't know the people. And we made this good presentation, and he just went, no. He said, people aren't interested in people. They're only interested in news. And just like that, I lost that idea. But it obviously stayed in my mind. And a couple of months later, this unknown woman named Barbara Walters. She went to her producer, and her producer said, yes, let's do it. And she did it for decades, right? So I've always felt that that's where my interest is. Like I love public policy, but who are the people making it, changing it? What's the effect on people? So I hope I'm doing the same thing.
I think you are. And more power to you, Carole. You're doing a very good job, and I look up to you, and thank you for being a woman in focus today.
Well, thank you, Sushma. I'm such an admirer.
Carole Taylor has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.